Good seats up front.
Thank you. You're welcome.
One of the great stories that a guy named John Whitmer, who's a rock band performer who then came to be part of forming something called, the ministry just went away. Anyway, but he talks about his conversion experience, and he's a rocker and a smoker, and he went to the Baptist Jews, invited to a Baptist church, and so the only thing he knew was concert church, and he walked in, and he said, he said, I couldn't believe it. This guy who was the usher took me to the very best seats. I had a front row seat. Yeah, you're in church now, buddy. All right, folks, good morning. Happy to welcome you back for the second week that we're going to spend in this interesting place talking about stuff that makes us troubled and crazy and angry and what's going on in the world. Again, apologies to those of you from my Sunday school class who've seen some of this before, but we'll dip in a couple of different areas as well. But I want to start this morning, if we could, just with a little bit of a catch up. So I didn't get a lot of questions. Got a couple of emails. Found out there's somebody out in Bison. Welcome. We're happy you're here with us out west of Boisington, who's listening in and has found this church, and not just because of the class, but also is an attendee here. So we're very happy that she can join us this morning, as well as others from the congregation who are away. And so all of you who are listening online, we're delighted that you're with us. We've got a good group here this morning. I wanted to go back, though, and talk a little bit about Elephant Rider. And in conversation, at least one person, and maybe a couple of persons, have said something about left brain, right brain. Not the same, okay? Left brain, right brain does not map onto Elephant Rider. The left brain, right thing is part of the rational rider's stuff, right? So however your elephant reacts, you'd be left brain, right brain, you still got an elephant, right? Yeah, so it's, whether you're creative or you're the accountant or the engineer, no, you still got an elephant, and it's still a big elephant. It's better, really, it does map to the head-heart thing, and I'm remembering, and this was after we got done last week, I was kind of thinking more about this, and it dawned on me that one of the things in seminary, and I think it's also true in any of the social services when you're in training, when you're studying, they talk about head-heart stuff. You got to get those in balance, because if you go into something with your head and you're in that kind of work, that's kind of cold. But if you're all heart and no head, that's not good either, right? If your career is emotional, if you're driven by how you're feeling and not thinking clearly, that's also not a good thing. And so just wanted to kind of tighten up the focus on that item. The other thing that I went away thinking about last week was the politics and religion thing. So I went up online and found Pew Research I was curious about the political affiliation of our government, right? And looked at the legislature, the national legislature now, not the Kansas legislature, the national legislature. So what is the religious affiliation? How does that all map out? And it was kind of interesting. They're of the 500, they only had 534 because at the time I think somebody had died and hadn't been replaced. But of that number, 307 identified as Protestant, about 170 as Catholic. Within the Protestants, the denominations ranked Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and then da-da-da-da-da-da, and then on into others who are unaffiliated or unchosen. I mean, they just have chosen not to identify their religion. I thought that was really interesting. And of course, the other thing, and I kind of knew the answer to this, but Dell got a little deeper into it because the Supreme Court is so big in our lives at the moment. So the current makeup of the Supreme Court, and this is vastly different than it was 20 years ago and certainly 30 years ago, but the current religious affiliation makeup of the Supreme Court, if you don't know this, is 7 Catholics, 1 unaffiliated Protestant, and 1 Jew. Wow. Yeah, wow. And so then you think back on their work and you go, okay, well that's really interesting. The other interesting thing is that of those 7 Catholics, 1 of whom lines up in the liberal camp of the 6, 5 of the 6 were nominated by presidents who didn't receive a majority vote of the country, right? Who lost the popular vote. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we talk about religion and politics. Wow. Okay. And there are organizations, very serious political organizations that are religious. C Street is one in Washington, and different groups who are very, very active. So I just thought that was a little bit of interest. So here we go. So this session, we're going to talk about the righteous mind. Here we are in the second session of this, and it occurred to me that our outline here is really, the elephant in the rider. So who are we? Kind of how do we work? How does our mind work? And then this one really talks about who are they? How do we understand others? Who are others? How are they different from us, wherever we think we are on whatever spectrum? And then lastly, how do we get along together is the last piece of this. So always good to start with a Wesley quote. I love this one, and I've used it so many times that you should know it. To be ignorant of many things and to be mistaken in some is the necessary condition of humanity. Wesley obviously said of mankind. This is the Wesley quote that for me says, I know some stuff. There's some stuff I don't know. The tricky part is there's some of the stuff that I know I'm wrong about. So it's a statement of humility. It's a statement of owning who we are and what we know, but it's also a statement of, as I also like to say, I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's true of each one of us. It's true of us as Methodists. We have some really cool pieces. I think we got some corner pieces. I think grace, that whole grace thing that Wesley developed in the prevenient grace, justifying grace, sanctifying grace, I think that's really, really important. It's major, but we do not have all the puzzle pieces. Certainly don't have all the edge pieces, and I know, I don't think we have all the corners either. So it's a statement of humility. What we're going to do today is a lot out of a book written by a guy named Jonathan Haidt, whom I also mentioned. Jonathan Haidt is a professor, now a professor of moral psychology at the Stern School of Business at NYU. When he wrote this book, he was at the University of Virginia. Haidt had previously published a book called The Happiness Hypothesis, has since published 2 or 3 books. He is a significant critic of the coddling of students in the education process. He is very much a proponent of getting people off screens. His latest book is called The Anxious Generation. Is that right, Judy? Encyclopedia Britannica. I heard a great joke, so I got to tell you this joke. So this guy who, so these 3 old guys are at a dinner party, and the women have gone off in the kitchen. The guys are, living room. This guy, one guy says, I'm feeling so good these days. I've taken this medication, and it's improved my memory, and I just feel alive. I'm so with it. I'm on it now. And the guy said, well, that's really great. What's the medication? He said, so wait a minute. Thorns flower, and the guy says, Rose? He says, yeah, that's right. Hey, Rose, what's that medication I'm taking? That's from a program called What to Feed Phil. Or, you know, if you haven't caught that on Netflix, that's worth a look. Somebody needs to feed Phil. Jonathan Haidt, so in The Anxious Mind, has a real critique and charts the negative effects of screens on youth, and looks at statistics over time about teen depression and suicides, and really builds a really significant case. The video that we're going to watch here now is a video that he made prior to the book being published, but it is the content of this book. And he gave a TED Talk about a year and a half before he published the book. And this TED Talk kind of covers the thematic content of the book. I'll do a trigger warning here. There's one graphic where he uses a graphic and he uses a vulgarity, but he does put asterisks in. So I think that makes it okay, but if your elephant goes there, okay. All right. So here we go. This is Jonathan Haidt at a TED Talk.
Suppose that two American friends are traveling together in Italy. They go to see Michelangelo's David. And when they finally come face to face with the statue, they both freeze dead in their tracks. The first guy, we'll call him Adam, is transfixed by the beauty of the perfect human form. The second guy, we'll call him Bill, is transfixed by embarrassment at staring at the thing there in the center. So here's my question for you. Which one of these two guys was more likely to have voted for George Bush, which for Al Gore? I don't need to show our hands because we all have the same political stereotypes. We all know that it's Bill. And in this case, the stereotype corresponds to a reality. It really is a fact that liberals are much higher than conservatives on a major personality trait called openness to experience. People who are high on openness to experience just crave novelty, variety, diversity, new ideas, travel. People low on it like things that are familiar, that are safe and dependable. If you know about this trait, you can understand a lot of puzzles about human behavior. You can understand why artists are so different from accountants. You can actually predict what kinds of books they like to read, what kinds of places they like to travel to, and what kinds of food they like to eat. Once you understand this trait, you can understand why anybody would eat at Applebee's, but not anybody that you know. This trait also tells us a lot about politics. The main researcher of this trait, Robert McCrae, says that open individuals have an affinity for liberal, progressive, left-wing political views. They like a society which is open and changing. Whereas closed individuals prefer conservative, traditional, right-wing views. This trait also tells us a lot about the kinds of groups people join. So here's the description of a group I found on the web. What kinds of people would join a global community welcoming people from every discipline and culture who seek a deeper understanding of the world and who hope to turn that understanding into a better future for us all? This is from some guy named Ted. Well, let's see now. If openness predicts who becomes liberal and openness predicts who becomes a Tedster, then might we predict that most Tedsters are liberal? Let's find out. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand whether you are liberal, left of center on social issues we're talking about primarily, or conservative, and I'll give a third option because I know there are a number of libertarians in the audience. So right now, please raise your hand, down in the simulcast rooms too, let's let everybody see who's here. Please raise your hand if you would say that you are liberal or left of center. Please raise your hand high right now. Okay. Please raise your hand if you say you're libertarian. Okay, about 2 dozen. And please raise your hand if you say you are right of center or conservative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 8 or 10. Okay. This is a bit of a problem. Because if our goal is to understand the world, to seek a deeper understanding of the world, our general lack of moral diversity here is going to make it harder. Because when people all share values, when people all share morals, they become a team. And once you engage the psychology of teams, it shuts down open-minded thinking. When the liberal team loses, as it did in 2004 and as it almost did in 2000, we comfort ourselves. we try to explain why half of America voted for the other team. We think they must be blinded by religion or by simple stupidity. So if you think that half of America votes Republican because they are blinded in this way, then my message to you is that you're trapped in a moral matrix, in a particular moral matrix. And by the matrix, I mean literally the matrix, like the movie The Matrix. But I'm here today to give you a choice. You can either take the blue pill and stick to your comforting delusions, or you can take the red pill, learn some moral psychology, and step outside the moral matrix. Now, because I know... Okay, I assume that answers my question. I was going to ask you which one you pick, but no need. You're all high in openness to experience, and besides, it looks like it might even taste good, and you're all epicures. So anyway, let's go with the red pill. Let's study some moral psychology and see where it takes us. Let's start at the beginning. What is morality, and where does it come from? The worst idea in all of psychology is the idea that the mind is a blank slate at birth. Developmental psychology has shown that kids come into the world already knowing so much about the physical and social worlds, and programmed to make it really easy for them to learn certain things and hard to learn others. The best definition of innateness I've ever seen, this just clarifies so many things for me, is from the brain scientist Gary Marcus. He says, the initial organization of the brain does not depend that much on experience. Nature provides a first draft, which experience then revises. Built in doesn't mean unmalleable, it means organized in advance of experience. Okay, so what's on the first draft of the moral mind? To find out, my colleague Craig Joseph and I read through the literature on anthropology, on cultural variation and morality, and also on evolutionary psychology, looking for matches. What are the sorts of things that people talk about across disciplines, that you find across cultures, and even across species? We found five best matches, which we call the 5 foundations of morality. The first one is harm care. We're all mammals here. We all have a lot of neural and hormonal programming that makes us really bond with others, care for others, feel compassion for others, especially the weak and vulnerable, gives us very strong feelings about those who cause harm. This moral foundation underlies about 70% of the moral statements I've heard here at TED. The second foundation is fairness, reciprocity. There's actually ambiguous evidence as to whether you find reciprocity in other animals, but the evidence for people could not be clearer. This Norman Rockwell painting is called The Golden Rule, and we heard about this from Armstrong, of course, is the foundation of so many religions. That second foundation underlies the other 30% of the moral statements I've heard here at TED. Third foundation is in-group loyalty. You do find groups in the animal kingdom, you do find cooperative groups, but these groups are always either very small or they're all siblings. It's only among humans that you find very large groups of people who are able to cooperate, join together into groups, but in this case, groups that are united to fight other groups. This probably comes from our long history of tribal living, of tribal psychology. And this tribal psychology is so deeply pleasurable that even when we don't have tribes, we go ahead and make them because it's fun. Sports is to war as pornography is to sex. We get to exercise some ancient tribes.
Can we close this?
Respect. Here you see submissive gestures from two members of very closely related species. But authority in humans is not so mostly based on power and brutality as it is in other primates.
I think you usually see everybody.
Deference and even elements of love at times. The fifth foundation is purity, sanctity. This painting is called The Allegory of Chastity, but purity is not just about suppressing female sexuality. It's about any kind of ideology, any kind of idea that tells you that you can attain virtue by controlling what you do with your body, by controlling what you put into your body, and while the political right may moralize sex much more. The political left is really doing a lot of it with food. Food is becoming extremely moralized nowadays, and a lot of it is ideas about purity, about what you're willing to touch or put into your body. I believe these are the 5 best candidates for what's written on the first draft of the moral mind. I think this is what we come with, is preparedness to learn all of these things. But as my son Max grows up in a liberal college town, how is this first draft going to get revised? And how will it end up being different from a kid born 60 miles south of us in Lynchburg, Virginia? So think about cultural variation. Let's try a different metaphor. If there really are 5 systems at work in the mind, 5 sources of intuitions and emotions, then we can think of the moral mind as being like one of those audio equalizers that has 5 channels where you can set it to a different setting on every channel. And my colleagues Brian Nozick and Jesse Graham and I made a questionnaire, www.yourmorals.org. And so far, 30,000 people have taken this questionnaire, and you can too. Here are the results. Here are the results from about 23,000 American citizens. On the left, I plotted the scores for liberals. On the right, those for conservatives. In the middle, the moderates. The blue line shows you people's responses on the average of all the harm questions. So as you see, people care about harm and care issues. They give high endorsement of these sorts of statements all across the board, but as you also see, liberals care about it a little more than conservatives. The line slopes down. Same story for fairness. But look at the other three lines. For liberals, the scores are very low. Liberals are basically saying, no, this is not morality. In-group authority, this stuff has nothing to do with morality, I reject it. But as people get more conservative, the values rise. We could say that liberals have a kind of a two-channel or two-foundation morality. Conservatives have more of a five-foundation, a five-channel morality. We find this in every country we look at. Here's the data for 1,100 Canadians. I'll just flip through a few other slides. The UK, Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, to East Asia, and South Asia. Notice also that on all of these graphs, the slope is steeper on in-group authority purity, which shows that within any country, the disagreement isn't over harm and fairness. Everybody, I mean, we debate over what's fair, but everybody agrees that harm and fairness matter. Moral arguments within cultures are especially about issues of in-group authority purity. This effect is so robust that we find it no matter how we ask the question. In one recent study, we asked people to suppose you're about to get a dog, you picked a particular breed, you learned some new information about the breed. Suppose you learn that this particular breed is independent-minded and relates to its owner as a friend and an equal. Well, if you're a liberal, you say, hey, that's great, because liberals like to say, fetch, please. But if you're conservative, that's not so attractive. If you're conservative and you learn that a dog is extremely loyal to its home and family and doesn't warm up quickly to strangers, for conservative, well, loyalty is good. Dogs ought to be loyal. But to a liberal, it sounds like this dog is running for the Republican nomination. So you might say, okay, there are these differences between liberals and conservatives, but what makes those three other foundations moral? Aren't those just the foundations of xenophobia, authoritarianism, and Puritanism? What makes them moral? The answer, I think, is contained in this incredible triptych from Hieronymus Bosch, The Garden of Earthly Delights. In the first panel, we see the moment of creation. All is ordered, all is beautiful, all the people and animals are doing what they're supposed to be doing, where they're supposed to be. But then, given the way of the world, things change. We get every person doing whatever he wants with every aperture of every other person and every other animal. Some of you might recognize this as the 60s. But the 60s inevitably gives way to the 70s, where the cuttings of the apertures hurt a little bit more. Of course, Bosch called this hell. So this triptych, these three panels, portray the timeless truth that order tends to decay, the truth of social entropy. But lest you think this is just some part of the Christian imagination where Christians have this weird problem with pleasure, here's the same story, the same progression, told in a paper that was published in Nature a few years ago, in which Ernst Fair and Simon Gachter had people play a commons dilemma, a game in which you give people money, and then on each round of the game, they can put money into a common pot, and then the experimenter doubles what's in there, and then it's all divided among the players. So it's a really nice analog for all sorts of environmental issues, where we're asking people to make a sacrifice, and they themselves don't really benefit from their own sacrifice, but you really want everybody else to sacrifice, but everybody has a temptation to free ride. And what happens is that at first people start off reasonably cooperative, and this is all played anonymously. On the first round, people give about half of the money that they can, but they quickly see, you know what, other people aren't doing so much, so I don't want to be a sucker, I'm not going to cooperate, and so cooperation quickly decays from reasonably good to zero. But then, and here's the trick, Fair and Gachter said on the 7th round, they told people, you know what, new rule, if you want to give some of your own money to punish people who aren't contributing, you can do that. And as soon as people heard about the punishment issue going on, cooperation shoots up. It shoots up and it keeps going up. There's a lot of research showing that to solve cooperative problems, it really helps. It's not enough to just appeal to people's good motives. It really helps to have some sort of punishment, even if it's just shame or embarrassment or gossip. You need some sort of punishment to bring people, when they're in large groups, to cooperate. There's even some recent research suggesting that religion, priming God, making people think about God, often in some situations leads to more cooperative, more pro-social behavior. Some people think that religion is an adaptation evolved both by cultural and biological evolution to make groups to cohere, in part for the purpose of trusting each other and then being more effective at competing with other groups. I think that's probably right, although this is a controversial issue. But I'm particularly interested in religion, in the origin of religion, and in what it does to us and for us, because I think that the greatest wonder in the world is not the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is really simple. It's just a lot of rock and then a lot of water and wind and a lot of time, and you get the Grand Canyon. It's not that complicated. This is what's really complicated, that there were people living in places like the Grand Canyon, cooperating with each other, or on the savannas of Africa, or on the frozen shores of Alaska. And then some of these villages grew into the mighty cities of Babylon and Rome and Tenochtitlan. How did this happen? This is an absolute miracle, much harder to explain than the Grand Canyon. The answer, I think, is that they used every tool in the toolbox. It took all of our moral psychology to create these cooperative groups. Yes, you do need to be concerned about harm, you do need the psychology of justice, but it really helps to organize a group if you can have subgroups, and if those subgroups have some internal structure, and if you have some ideology that tells people to suppress their carnality, to pursue higher, nobler ends. And now we get to the crux of the disagreement between liberals and conservatives, because liberals reject three of these foundations. You know, let's celebrate diversity, not common in group membership. They say let's question authority, and they say keep your laws off my body. Liberals have very noble motives for doing this. Traditional authority, traditional morality can be quite repressive and restrictive to those at the bottom, to women, to people who don't fit in. So liberals speak for the weak and oppressed. They want change and justice, even at the risk of chaos. If this guy's shirt says, stop bitching, start a revolution. If you're high enough to experience, revolution is good, it's change, it's fun. Conservatives, on the other hand, speak for institutions and traditions. They want order, even at some cost, to those at the bottom. The great conservative insight is that order is really hard to achieve, it's really precious, and it's really easy to lose. So as Edmund Burke said, the restraints on men, as well as their liberties, are to be reckoned among their rights, which is after the chaos of the French Revolution. So once you see this, once you see that liberals and conservatives both have something to contribute, that they form a balance on change versus stability, then I think the way is open to step outside the moral matrix. This is the great insight that all the Asian religions have attained. Think about yin and yang. Yin and yang aren't enemies. Yin and yang don't hate each other. Yin and yang are both necessary, like night and day, for the functioning of the world. You find the same thing in Hinduism. There are many high gods in Hinduism. Two of them are Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer. This image actually is both of those gods sharing the same body. You have the markings of Vishnu on the left, so we could think of Vishnu as the conservative god. You have the markings of Shiva on the right. Shiva is the liberal god, and they work together. You find the same thing in Buddhism. These two stanzas contain, I think, the deepest insights that have ever been attained into moral psychology, from the Zen master Senson. If you want the truth to stand clear before you, never be for or against. The struggle between for and against is the mind's worst disease. Unfortunately, it's a disease that has been caught by many of the world's leaders. But before you feel superior to George Bush, before you throw a stone, ask yourself, do you accept this? Do you accept stepping out of the battle of good and evil? Can you be not for or against anything? So what's the point? What should you do? Well, if you take the greatest insights from ancient Asian philosophies and religions and you combine them with the latest research on moral psychology, I think you come to these conclusions, that our righteous minds were designed by evolution to unite us into teams, to divide us against other teams, and then to blind us to the truth. So, what should you do? Am I telling you to not strive? Am I telling you to embrace Sensan and stop? Stop with this struggle of for and against? No, absolutely not. I'm not saying that. This is an amazing group of people who are doing so much, using so much of their talent, their brilliance, their energy, their money to make the world a better place, to fight wrongs, to solve problems. But as we learned from Samantha Power in her story about Sergio Vieira de Neto, you can't just go charging in, saying you're wrong and I'm right. Because as we just heard, everybody thinks they are right. A lot of the problems we have to solve are problems that require us to change other people. And if you want to change other people, a much better way to do it is to first understand who we are, understand our moral psychology, understand that we all think we're right, and then step out, even if it's just for a moment, step out, check in with Sensan, step out of the moral matrix, just try to see it as a struggle playing out in which everybody does think they're right. Everybody at least has some reasons, even if you disagree with them, everybody has some reasons for what they're doing. Step out, if you do that, that's the essential move to cultivate moral humility, to get yourself out of this self-righteousness, which is the normal human condition. Think about the Dalai Lama. Think about the enormous moral authority of the Dalai Lama, and it comes from his moral humility. So I think the point of my talk, and I think the point of TED, is that this is a group that's passionately engaged in the pursuit of changing the world for the better. People here are passionately engaged in trying to make the world a better place. But there is there's also a passionate commitment to the truth. So I think that the answer is to use that passionate commitment to the truth to try to turn it into a better future for us all. Thank you.
Forgot where I was there for a second. So one thing I'd like to tell you about Jonathan Haidt, and I heard in an interview that he gave to, I think, the dean of the business school at the University of Pennsylvania, and he asked him so where were you when you started the study? And Haidt says, when he began the study, he began it partly because he was really angry with the Democrats because he didn't think that they didn't know how to articulate and connect with people, and that's why they'd lost the election that he was really invested in on behalf of the Democratic candidate for the presidency. And then he got into the study, and thank God he's a good and faithful academic who really is rigorous with himself as well as with the data, and he discovered this, and this is not where he thought he was headed. In terms of his discovery of this graph and the fact that the differences have to do with intensities and with these, and I'm going to give you this this will be part of the package that you get and the link to this as well when we wrap up the thing next week. So I thought that was just really interesting that Haidt really brought his biases into, I mean, that's who he was, and as I said last week, we all have biases. He recognized his, but he did this study and discovered that he understood things in a new way. His religious part of this that you read in the book is he spent 3 months in India, living with a family, with a very devout Hindu family. He's Jewish, non-practicing. So he can tell you he's an ethnic Jew, atheist, academic, right? A lot of stuff that doesn't fit with us, but very, very interesting. And he lived with his family and patriarchy and the whole thing, and really comes through with an appreciation of the religious dynamics, the faith dynamics of life. That's really wonderful to read from somebody outside that reality, appreciating it and appreciating what it does for us. So this is, I love this because this kind of fits with some thoughts that I've always had about kind of keeping your feet in two camps, and I think that's really one of the things that helped me in the military and in ministry as well. It's always been kind of easy to kind of keep some balance in two camps and kind of get crazy when you see people going over the edge in the other way. And I want to give you one example because it's really an interesting example and it connects with us. When the 2019 General Conference kind of blew up for us, United Methodists, and very restrictive language was adopted, and the schism was pretty evident then. There was thought that the church was going to split into 3 parts. There was going to be a part that was the traditionalist part, the conservatives, and they were going to be one piece. The kind of us, the more adaptable, what would we call accommodation, compatibilist. Thank you, Aaron. That's exactly the word I was looking for, but that was what was used. Was another faction, and then there was this uber liberal faction, and that was going to be a reality. And a group of pastors, largely up in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin is where they were coming to Chicago, got together and began to talk about forming a church called the Methodist Connection with X's for connection, so it was very with it. And they wrote statements and put down a kind of a marker about what they wanted to be, and have a website, which is still there, interestingly, although they are not. What's interesting about this, I saw the reports and I read, I didn't have to read much. And I went, that's never happened. That is never happening because it was a group of people way over here, very, very concerned and honestly and deeply concerned about care, fairness, and harm, and being open to everybody, to the point that this stuff wasn't just low. This kind of drops off the radar, and everything that has to do with authority is a negative because there's no such thing as good authority, and there's no such thing as good organization. That's the man automatically, and that blew up. They had a meeting, and this is the interesting part that you can read on the web, because they were very honest about what happened, and God bless them for doing that. They had a meeting, and the statement that then gets released is, we can't agree on anything. We can't agree on the language we're going to use, and it turns out that different people have different goals, and there's no authority built in, there's no structure built in, there's no real accountability built in, and so it just falls apart. It is the entropy argument, right? It just falls apart and becomes that third pane in Bosch's wonderful painting, which hangs in the Prada in Madrid, if you're ever there. That is awesome. But not a good backdrop for your desktop, just saying. Okay. So that was the Methodist connection. Let me give one additional quote of Wesley's, because I think this one also goes with the humility part. Wesley said, in the essentials, unity; in the non-essentials, diversity; in all things, charity. Think for a moment what that would look like if that were applied to our politics. In the essentials, unity. What are the things that all of us agree upon and stand for? In the non-essentials, diversity. What are those things that are the policy things that don't go to the fabric or the core of body politic? But regardless of whether it's essential or non-essential, in all things we're going to be charitable with one another.
You put liberty, it says liberty there instead of diversity.
Well, I say it better than Wesley said it. Mine is I'm the NIV translation of John Wesley. I'm not backing. Thank you, Alice. I'll get you later. So the righteous mind is really about other, but it's really about us and how we understand other people, right? Now, I think it needs to be said, I'm hesitant to say it, this doesn't account for, this is real conservatism and real liberalism, okay? This is not necessarily any political party today, because it's not necessarily the case that any political party is purely or even closely liberal or conservative. This is about true liberalism and true conservatism, and it tends to be the case that we hang out with one another, and that's that blind spot he talks about. You hear it referred to as the bubble in other places, right? We read the same newspaper all the time. We watch the same TV channel all the time, and we kind of cement ourselves into that place where we're right and they're wrong, because we hear all of the ways that we're wrong because of the news that we watch or the things that we read, and that continue to assure us that we are wise and thoughtful and morally upright, and how could you ever argue against my position? And if you do, then you're, as a friend of mine used to say, you're either mad, bad, sick, or stupid. Pick your category. You're one of those things because you don't get it, and you really ought to get it. little bit of time for some questions this morning. We're going to, since you saw that film, what is your reaction to the film anyway? Any thoughts? Wow, okay. Stunned silence. Mike.
So Mike, that last slide that you showed.
Yes.
So.
This one or this
No,
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do we agree on what's essential?
Well, see, there you go. But I think that's an easier conversation. It's an easier conversation to have than you might imagine. And the first thing we do is we strip out the propaganda language, right? Make it a pure, so liberty, okay? Freedom to, freedom to worship, freedom to speak, freedom to be who we are. I think that you could stand up next to somebody who you really disagree with and agree that you get to be who you are. And nobody should be able to tell you to be somebody else. Now, you are both somebody else's, right? Believe that to make that is kind of. I think there's general agreement on the universal goods. Okay, so life is precious. And then we get into the peripheral issues where things get tough. I'm not saying they're not important, and let me say that. Non-essentials are not non-important. They're just not core. Let me give you an example. So theologically for me, you say, okay, so what are the essentials? Two sacraments are not essential in terms of my faith, right? The fact, are there two or are there seven? In Roman Catholicism, that's not essential. I don't have a lot of dogmas. I can list dogmas from other faiths, not essential to me. I don't think they are essential to faith. What's essential? God, creator of all things, essential. And the Christ, God's presence in the world, essential. Unessential to me are the verbatim accounts of any miracle. That's not where faith comes from. Unessential to me are any number of stories about this happened, that happened. So I'm not bothered by the fact, for instance, there are different accounts of the aftermath of the resurrection. Okay, I'm fine with that. What's important to me is that Christ, God present in the world, is a reality. And all the rest of that it's not unimportant, it's just not essential. Okay? That's kind of the difference for me. And I think that's true in our life broadly as well. Have I provoked anybody else? Alice?
Well, I think it's just interesting as to how we interpret words, because probably I was looking at that because I have trouble driving by 21st and Gage, where people stand with flags saying honk if you believe in liberty.
Mm-hmm.
And, that can mean, I think
Alice is saying that she's having trouble as she goes by 21st and Gage and seeing people honk if you love liberty. And so, if you honk, are you honking for them and their position, what you think they believe, or are you honking? And choir members, by the way, don't forget we're singing this morning, so I'm being reminded by choir members who are exiting. These aren't people who are angry; they're just singers. Yeah, that's really kind of tough, and it gets into the issue of the captivation of language. And I think that's one of the things that we need to fight against. And it doesn't matter whether you're conservative or liberal. People ought not own language. And so, patriotism is not a left-right thing in my brain. Patriotism is something totally different. and faith, you know, is not tied to certain things. You don't get to own that. And it would be crazy to think that you could when you think back to the, you know, if you want to talk about these things, if you want to talk about these things and you realize that liberals and conservatives are this way, then those words, if they get captured and used and become owned by one side or the other, that benefits no one. And it really, and really what that's about, if you think about it, it's in service of demonizing the other side. Because when you try to own a term, you're kind of, it's more about denying that term to the other side as it is about owning it for yourself. That's what demonization does. Good question, thank you.
Mike, how would you define sanctity?
How would I what?
Define sanctity.
Oh, sanctity. Yeah, that's it. So what, I'm curious about what you thought about his point that, you know, when we think of sanctity, automatically, because we argue a whole lot, or there's a lot of debate and angst around matters of sexuality, but then him pointing out that, oh yeah, but it's also about, it's about food. It's about apparel, you know? I mean, are leather coats okay? Seriously, I mean, you know, our leather, you know, where do we get that? We get that from dead animals, is that all right? And that's, there are folks who legitimately ask that question, they're very serious about it. They're not, they tend not to be over here, they tend to be over here, okay? But sanctity and purity, I think has real meaning for us, and if you think about it, I just think about raising kids. You know, sanctity and purity has to do with the belief that you are the basic belief that you're a moral person. You know, that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. That you want to be a person your parents are proud of. That it's a place where shame enters in big time, right? Shame doesn't tend to enter into authority, group, those other ones, but that's where, you know, the purity thing is kind of who you are as a person and what you think of yourself internally, right? So, I don't know if that gets to it, but...
Sort of.
Sort of. What sort of did? Okay, you'll look at that. All right. Okay, thanks. Yes, Scott.
So one of the big things that I take away from this and thoughts that came into my mind, kind of like what Mike brought up, is, so what is your definition of essentials? Or what is your definition of liberty? Or what is your personal, I'm talking about you personally, not you personally.
Right, I understand.
Individually. And so we base off of that the way we think others should think. But I think one of the key things, going back to the beginning, is you may think this way, you may believe this way. Are you willing, though, to tell yourself, but maybe I don't know everything, and open yourself up to exploring, reading, learning, talking to other people? You may still come back to your original belief, but at least you're a little more knowledgeable and understanding of the other viewpoint. And I think that's one of the things that's missing in society today, is people don't want to take that moment to say, wait a minute, maybe I don't know everything about this.
Yeah, and I, Scott, you're exactly right, and I think that it's even a step further in that today, in much of the political world, it's not just a matter of I'm absolutely right. I know that I'm right. It's this is what my team says, and I'm not allowed to say anything other than what my team says. And if I even not even go negative, but I even open the fact to some nuanced view or some even-handed view, I'm automatically a traitor to my team, and I'm cut out, right? That's reality today in a lot of politics, and driven by gerrymandering and a whole lot of other things that happen in our country. But that then further solidifies the team and sets the team against, we form into teams, we set against other teams, and it blinds us. That it binds us and it blinds us. Those are his two mantras. Yeah.
And I think, excuse me, I think
Go ahead.
that's the key, Mike, is that all of us here have opinions about something, and we've all got our elephants. And I think one of the things that, okay, this is just for Max, okay?
Yeah.
I've got to realize that and understand that, doggone, I've got to be open and don't be closed-minded. I mean, it's such an easy thing to talk about, but it's such a hard thing to do, because immediately, just like breathing, boom, you. And so that is the key to understand that, okay, yeah, I've got some deep-seated ideas, no matter what the issue is, but then it's like, doggone it, rein it back. But the key is, how do we do that?
Well, we're going to talk about that next week. We are. And so next week, blue pill, red pill, I got a purple pill for you. I really don't. But I think there are strategies for addressing that. And one, for me, one of the strategies is to kind of see clearly what's going on. So my clear start point for I'm done with certain kind of politics was understanding, so in 1991, there's this political action committee that puts out a paper that very intentionally, and not subtly, very intentionally said, here are the names that you're supposed to call the other people. Here's how you are supposed to typify them. They are evil, they are un-American, the policy they want will destroy us, and it was, here's how you get elected. And what it was an elephant guidance document, really, right? It was, here's how you fire people up in the negative. And you can just watch that build. And if you get a hold of that document, it's a very interesting document to read. And I won't say more than that because I don't want to get into partisan stuff.
Understand. Yeah.
Okay. Carl.
One of my pet peeves is not telling the truth. The agencies are not open and honest and truthful. And the truth ultimately dominates. But how do we get the press?
Well, and so Carl's question was, his pet peeve is people not telling the truth, and how do you get to the truth? Troublesome in that people can look at the same thing and have different truths to be understood. As an example, and I'm not going to say, it's irrelevant which side of this thing. So in an election, a legislature says, there's a pandemic going on, and the only way to really, one good is to involve as many people as possible who want to vote, to get them to vote, because we want people to vote, right? And voting is a civic obligation, and we should make it possible for them in the midst of a pandemic to do that safely. And so the legislature gets together, and they pass an ordinance that says that you can mail in, but in some way eases voting, okay? That does not adhere to the benefit of a party who then looks at that and says, well, wait a minute, that you changed the rules of the election, and so more voters on the other side got to vote than we would have liked, and we think that redounded to our detriment, and we don't like that. That's our truth. You, quote, interfered in the election. Where on the other side, the truth is, we acted to broaden so that we could ensure that people could vote. You see where it gets hard? Because, and so people can disagree about that. You gotta talk that out. And that's an interesting debate to have, but shouldn't be the basis for the end of relationships, right? Truth gets tricky. And that's not all, sometimes truth is not tricky, right? When you can add up things and there are numbers, then bang, that's a number, that's not tricky for me. But we ought not automatically assume that our truth is the only truth, or the only way to see truth. That's part of the problem. That's part of what he's talking about here. Particularly when we see, because if you think about it, where is the thing that says we want everybody to be able to cast their vote? Well, that's over here on fairness, right? And there would be people who would argue, and I'm not saying just because you can fall on the line that you're right. People could argue, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. The rules are the rules, and we got to live by the rules, and you can't change the rules. Interestingly, if you flip that and talk about Supreme Court appointments, other people would make the opposite argument. So you see, it gets really, really interesting and complicated. And yet not worth sacrificing our health or our closest relationships over, to my mind. Yes, ma'am. Is that Natalie back there?
What's the name of that paper that you referred to that came out in '91?
Ask me and I will give to you, but if I name the paper, then I'd name the culprit, and I don't want to name the culprit, okay?
I can email you and you would send them.
You betcha. You betcha. I'll find the link and send it to you if you want it. Yes, sir.
You were talking about, I guess, people being elected don't want to leave the team or say something different from the team.
Right.
So is the team Republican or Democrat, or does each individual have their own team?
Well, I think the teams are clearly formed and defined, aren't they? I mean, I think there's. Yeah, I mean, the teams are lined up. We have a two-party team election pretty constantly. The third parties don't do well, so we're pretty much divided into two teams. I think one of the things that's interesting there, though, is that once a team gets in power, then the teams within the team start to show up. And then it gets crazy and chaotic, right? Because, and this is not left-right, this is everybody. I mean, you get a big team together, and you're operating a coalition, really, and you're agreeing on things to move forward and do things. Well, then it turns out everybody, it's like the young folks that tried to start the church, right? I mean, it was wonderful. They had great hearts. They were just so excited, and then they got together and decided and discovered that they really didn't want the same things at all. And so, so yeah, there are multiple teams, but it's kind of like, it's more a Venn diagram. There's the two big circles, and then there's all these little circles in there, and it gets tricky. As anybody who's had anything to do with public office would tell you. Is that right, Vicki Schmidt? Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what does the Bible say about these teams, and how much as a Christian should I really care or participate?
So what does the Bible say about this team thing, and how much should Christians care or err? What?
Care.
Care.
Care? That's a really good question. I think, so, one of the ways that teams started to form in Jesus' ministry was, there was Team John the Baptist and Team Jesus. But there were clearly, John the Baptist had a team, and the disciples were worried about that. So there were complaints, and Jesus said, back off. There were people who said they are, folks are out there baptizing, later baptizing. They're not us, or they're saying things, they're not us. And the word is, leave them alone. If they are doing good, then that will be fine, right? So there is, I think, scripture, and it's kind of implicit in the stories in the text, that in the end, we're all on an equal footing. We're all children of God. and we're all to love one another. And so ultimately it's Team God. And then, you know, we have little circles inside circles back to the Venn diagram, right? I'm trying to think. I mean, there was Team Circumcised and Team Uncircumcised. That got put down. I mean, every time there was a team thing, it gets squashed, right? Having said that, now the second part of your question is, should Christians care? I think that people of faith should prayerfully and honestly reflect upon their faith and where it leads them in terms of supporting people in public leadership. Let's not call it office, let's not call it party, political, whatever. Public leadership. Are these people of integrity? Are these people in whom I have confidence and trust? Are these people who are, I'm confident are doing the best, not for themselves, but for others? Are they servant leaders? And so you can put your own faith-derived schema on those decisions, and then act accordingly, however you're called to act, whether that's participation, funding, voting, however. I think that's the honest thing to say, and really isn't a left-right thing to say. Not a conservative liberal thing. It's just a faith thing to say. What I think that Christians should fight against is any suggestion that God is on one side or the other. That's blasphemy. That's the commandment that says, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. That's not about swearing. That is about oath-taking and about using God for profane reasons or purposes. And so you know, you get yourself in real trouble from a theological standpoint when you start using God or your faith, using it now, not being honest and open about it, but using it as a political tool. And shame on you. So, sorry, off the soapbox, done, okay. Yes, Larry.
Agree with what you just said with one editorial comment.
Okay, editorial comment from Larry on what I just said.
You said a Christian should. I would modify that to a Christian must. Okay, so Larry said, so I said a Christian should, and Larry would like to modify it to a Christian must. I gotta think about that, yeah. And in fact, and I would say maybe the other thing that I would take an exception of myself on would be the use of the word Christian. Instead, I think I would say disciple. Because there are a host of nominal Christians.
That's right.
Okay? Discipleship is another thing entirely. And so I think disciples have peculiar responsibilities. All right. Friends, I gotta go over there and warm up my voice. No, wait, I don't. But I gotta remember what we're singing earlier. So again, if you have a question, that's the email. Shoot me an email. And next week we're going to talk about, so what do we do? I mean, what are the things that we ought to be thinking about ourselves in terms of our consumption, in terms of our thinking about things, in terms of our relationships with family, with friends? Do we invite anybody over for Thanksgiving? Do we only invite the people we agree with? Or do we invite everybody and forbid the conversation go anywhere near religion or politics, right? Those are not the only options. All right, so thanks a lot. See you next week.